I'm sorry, but could you move out of your parents' house? We want to live there. Such an incredibly selfish demand from my sister. How much more does she need to take from me before she is satisfied? My name is Wendy and I'm 32 years old. I got married 5 years ago, but now I live alone. That's because shortly after getting married, I ended up getting divorced. I met my ex-husband, Scott, in a university club. It was a film research club, a club dedicated to making films. I had entered university as a regular student, but Scott took a gap year and joined a year later. Essentially, even though we were the same age, he was a year behind me. As a senior, I had a bit more experience, and I took it upon myself to teach Scott everything from how to use a camera to how to edit footage, as he was completely new to filmmaking. Naturally, for two people of our age, we quickly became close, not just within the club activities, but also started dating. Scott often visited my family home, where I lived with my parents. I have a younger sister named Michelle, who is 2 years younger than me. Because we were only two siblings, Michelle always used to say she wished she had a brother, and Scott fit right into that role for her. Scott became like a real brother to Michelle, and the two of them got along like siblings. It wasn't uncommon for the three of us to go out for meals or watch movies together. Even after I started working, our relationship continued, and the following year, after Scott also started working and got used to his job, we decided to get married. Living together in an apartment we rented was truly blissful. Despite being busy with work and household chores, the thought of being able to live together without anyone else's interference filled me with joy. We even dreamed of having children, at which point I would quit my job to become a full-time homemaker, wanting to build a bright and smile-filled home and prioritize family time above all else. However, one day that life came to an abrupt end. The dreams I had painted shattered so easily. Around the time when it was almost a year since we got married, a friend from the same university club whom we hadn't seen since getting busy with work and social life contacted me out of the blue to catch up over a meal. When we got married, our club members celebrated with us, throwing a party, but since then we had all become absorbed in our own lives and hadn't met. I was thrilled by the invitation, genuinely looking forward to this reunion. But contrary to my excitement, the face of my friend who I met up with was somehow gloomy. Her first question was unexpected.
"How's Scott doing lately?"
Surprised by the sudden question, I asked with a puzzled look. "What do you mean, how? He's as fine as ever. Why do you ask? You seem a bit off." Then my friend looked me straight in the eyes as if she had made up her mind and said,
"Don't be shocked, though I know it's hard, but there's something I really need you to hear."
As I looked puzzled, my friend began to tell me something unbelievable.
"I saw it."
Impatiently, I leaned forward. Saw what?
"I saw Scott walking with another woman."
Saying this, my friend pulled out her phone and showed me a picture. I was speechless when I saw it. In the picture, Scott was holding hands in a lover's grip with none other than my sister, Michelle. My friend also had taken pictures of them entering a hotel.
"I really debated whether or not to tell you, thinking it might be none of my business and that it would hurt you. I'm sorry."
My friend sounded truly apologetic, but I tried not to make her feel bad. "It's okay, really. Thank you for telling me. I'm glad I heard it from you." My voice was trembling, but I forced a smile and thanked her. Then I took a picture from her, and we parted ways that day. After parting ways with my friend, I couldn't accept reality. My mind went into a panic, and I was so shaken that I barely remember anything that happened afterward. Despite this, I somehow managed to walk home, one step at a time. Scott and Michelle indeed got along very well and seemed like real siblings whenever they were together. Even after we got married, Michelle would occasionally come over to our place to hang out. I couldn't believe that they had been meeting in secret behind my back. The day my friends saw the two of them together was a day Scott said he would be home late because of client dinner. Scott works in sales, so I knew he had various social obligations. But I had noticed that he had been coming home late more often lately. Despite this, I tried to support Scott, who was working hard. I made him balanced, nutritious lunches to take care of his health, and always tried to act energetically, even when I was tired, to make him feel at ease. Yet to find out he was betraying me behind my back, especially with my own sister, was a real shock. The fact that even my sister betrayed me left me deeply disturbed. Scott was supposed to be at home since it was a day off, but when I returned, he was nowhere to be seen. Late at night, when Scott came home, he was surprised to see me.
Oh? Wendy, you're already home? I thought you'd be out later since you said you were meeting a friend.
Scott, unaware of anything, started to relax and take off his coat. I could faintly smell women's perfume on him. I have something to talk to you about, so I came home early. Scott frowned slightly at my stern expression, but sat down at the table obediently.
What's up? What do you want to talk about?
He asked casually while drinking a beer. Could you take a look at this? I showed him a picture from my friend.
What's this?
Scott seemed truly shaken by my demeanor. As soon as he glanced at the screen, his face turned pale. This is you and Michelle, right? You don't look like siblings-in-law here, more like lovers. Scott's face grew even paler. This image shows you entering a hotel. So, Scott, what were you doing? Scott, in a panic, denied everything.
It's not what it looks like. It's a misunderstanding. There's no way we'd go to such a place.
Despite his attempts to deny it, with such clear evidence in front of us, do you really think excuses will work? How could you do such a thing behind my back and still live in this house as if nothing happened? It's unbelievable. Both of you. To think my own husband could enter into such a relationship with my sister? As I spoke, holding back tears, Scott eventually confessed everything. It all started when he ran into Michelle on his way home shortly after we got married. They decided to have tea together, and from then on, they met in secret for meals and drinks, gradually developing romantic feelings until they finally crossed the line.
Now, I can't stop thinking about Michelle. I feel bad for you, Wendy, but Michelle really loves me.
He says so. How can you say such selfish things? What about my feelings? How are you going to take responsibility? Just the other day, I went shopping with Michelle. Despite everything that was going on with Scott, she managed to go out with me as if nothing was amiss. I felt utterly disappointed in Michelle. And just like that, I lost all affection for Scott. Then, as if to add insult to injury, Scott said,
I'm not just saying this because we got caught, but I'm sorry. I want a divorce. I want to be with Michelle. We're serious about each other, and Michelle is pregnant.
I was stunned. Not just by the mention of divorce, but also by the fact that Michelle was pregnant. I had longed for a child with Scott. The shock left me in total disarray. I feel sick. I'm going to rest for today. Let's talk more about this tomorrow or later. Struggling to keep myself from collapsing, I went to the bedroom and got into bed. When I woke up the next morning, I wished yesterday's events were just a dream, but they were undeniably real. Perhaps because he felt awkward entering the bedroom, Scott, who must have slept on the sofa, was nowhere to be seen. I couldn't comprehend what was happening, and I searched the entire house for Scott, opening every door, but Scott was nowhere to be found. Upon closer inspection, all of Scott's belongings, including his clothes, had vanished cleanly, and only a single piece of paper was left on the table. It was a divorce paper with Scott's name on it. I tried calling Scott in a panic, but the call didn't go through, possibly blocked. I immediately tried to contact Michelle as well, but to no avail, just like Scott. Thinking they might be together at Michelle's apartment, where she lived alone, I rushed over, only to find it completely empty, with only the furniture left behind. Faced with such a cruel reality, everything went dark before my eyes. The two had eloped and disappeared somewhere. Alone in Michelle's room, I collapsed and cried. That night, blinded by tears, I trembled as I signed the divorce paper. Since we were children, Michelle always wanted what was mine. As her older sister, I tried to give in to her as much as possible to avoid making her cry, but I never imagined she would take away something as irreplaceable as my husband. I wondered if Michelle truly loved Scott as he claimed, or if she wanted him simply because he was my husband. No matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't find an answer. I even inquired at their workplace, but both Scott and Michelle had quit their jobs, and I had no idea where they were or what they were doing. My father was furious with both Scott and Michelle and said he would disown Michelle. he warmly welcomed me back to the family home now that I was alone. And so, 5 years have passed since then. At that time, I was consumed by grief and became like an empty shell, but I gradually managed to focus on my work and stand back up with encouragement from friends and colleagues. I became a workaholic as a way to fill the void in my heart. My efforts were recognized by my company, and I was recently appointed as the leader of a new project, further motivating me to dedicate myself to work. Then one day, my smartphone rang, and to my surprise, the caller was Michelle. I was severely shaken and hesitated, but decided to answer the call. Hello? I answered the phone cautiously, but the voice that came through was Michelle's, cheerful and unchanged.
Big sis? Long time no see, how are you?
It was as if the elopement had never happened. Michelle's voice was bright just like before.
How many years has it been? I really miss those days. How's work? You must have been promoted, right?
I didn't answer Michelle's question and instead asked, "Why are you calling all of a sudden? What do you want?" I was a bit irritated when she responded,
Scary. What's that about? We love the same person after all. I'm still happily living with your hand-me-down. Life is unpredictable, isn't it?
Was she serious with what she was saying? I was beyond angry and utterly dumbfounded. Though I wasn't informed due to being out of touch, it seemed they had indeed gotten married soon after and had a child who was safely born. Michelle began talking about her son without considering my feelings.
My kid's about to start kindergarten soon. It's nice to see him grow up, but it's hard because it costs a lot of money. It's hard being a parent. I think about it deeply.
I couldn't remain calm enough to accept Michelle's words. And I didn't want to continue the conversation with Michelle and wished to hang up as soon as possible.
You're so mean. Are you still hung up on this? It's been 5 years. It's childish. Just forget about it already.
As I stayed silent in anger, Michelle continued.
Well, whatever. Actually, kids grow up fast and we might have another family member soon, right? We're thinking of moving to a bigger house, but honestly, both Scott and I can only work part-time jobs now. Ever since we quit our previous jobs, for some reason we just can't get hired anywhere, and we're barely getting by. So I was thinking if we moved back to the family home, we wouldn't have to pay rent.
My irritation reached its limit. What are you trying to say?
Basically, I'm saying, can you give up the family home? You're living there now, right? We're in a more desperate situation. I'm sorry, but can you move out? We want to live there. And can you lend us some money for the time being?
I felt like I was going to collapse from such selfishness. Huh? Why do I have to move out? And I don't have any money to lend you. When I finally spoke up,
living with your sister would be awkward, wouldn't it? Since you're a single aristocrat, you can afford to rent a new place, right? You have the money, but you're still stingy. Some things never change.
Michelle laughed as she said this. Is she some kind of demon? That's ridiculous. Why don't you ask Scott's parents for help? Michelle laughed even harder at my suggestion.
Impossible. We can't. If that were an option, I wouldn't be asking you. Scott has had a falling out with his parents since then, and they don't even come to see their grandchild. They're really cold people.
Scott's parents had gone out of their way to visit my family home to apologize after the two eloped. They apologized to me and my father in tears for their son's misconduct. There's no way they would welcome Scott back now.
So, sis, please talk to Dad and convince him to let us live there.
At the time of their elopement, my father was still alive. My mother had passed away before my marriage, and my father had been living alone. A few months after I moved back home, my father was diagnosed with cancer and went through repeated hospitalizations. Last year, he passed away. Michelle was out of touch, so I couldn't inform her, and she wasn't invited to the funeral. I couldn't inform you, but Dad has passed away. I'm the only one in this house now, but even if Dad were here, it would be the same as with Scott's parents. He wouldn't forgive you guys or let you live here. That's the situation, so I'm not leaving. And it's impossible for you two to live here. That's the end of this conversation. As I tried to hang up,
Wait. Dad, are you serious? Are you really leaving? What? 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 Why didn't you tell me Dad died? That's terrible.
You didn't know because you guys blocked my number. What followed was even more unbelievable. Michelle had the audacity to say,
If Dad passed away, what's happening with the inheritance? I should have a share. Don't hide it, give it to me. It's my right to inherit.
She began shouting loudly.
The house should be mine too. We're just two sisters. It should be divided equally. Why do you get to keep living there? Give me my share.
Michelle's tone shifted dramatically, as if she had become a different person. Dad didn't leave anything for you. Don't expect anything. Hearing this, Michelle grew even more agitated.
That can't be true. You're lying, hogging all of Dad's inheritance for yourself because we're not there.
Although Michelle continued to yell, I forcefully ended the call. My father indeed left nothing for Michelle, having taken immediate action after she eloped with my husband. Consulting a lawyer, he ensured everything, including the house and all his possessions, would be inherited solely by me. As per my father's wishes, I inherited everything, leaving nothing for Michelle. I never wanted to hear her voice again, but she called back insisting,
You can't hang up. We're not done.
I was astounded by her persistence, especially regarding money.
I'm an heir too. You can't just say I don't have a share. That won't stand.
I explained carefully that our father had no intention of leaving anything to Michelle, but she was too furious to listen.
I won't give up. I will get that inheritance.
Michelle ended the call. Perhaps they were desperate for money. Michelle's greed made me uneasy. A few days later, Scott called. I anticipated this, but his attitude was even worse than Michelle's.
Hey, Wendy. I hear you've been spreading lies to Michelle. Despite everything, we're still family. I'm your sister's husband. Why are you so cold?
I was taken aback by Scott's audacity. Oh, is that so? I explained everything to Michelle.
You filled her head with lies. What about the inheritance she's supposed to get? The rights to the property, life insurance, and all that.
Scott bombarded me with questions about the inheritance, his voice lacking any trace of the Scott I once knew. Scott, maybe you should tell Michelle to visit Dad's grave first. Can you both stop obsessing over the inheritance? Everything I told Michelle is true. Dad left a will stating he left nothing for Michelle. Everything in this house is not hers, nor yours. I want nothing to do with you two ever again. Don't show up in my life. After hanging up, their obsession with the inheritance left me feeling a bit frightened, knowing they knew where the house was. I installed a security camera at the entrance and spent many anxious nights. However, for some reason, they never showed up, even after a month. I was living in fear of them, so I had a mutual friend check on them, revealing their shocking situation. Michelle claimed she and Scott were both working part-time jobs, but in reality, Scott was unemployed. Michelle was forced into working night shifts, while Scott spent his days drinking. Michelle, for her part, neglected their child, spending her days off gambling. It seemed that they were trying to steal my father's inheritance from me because they didn't want to work themselves. Eventually, they couldn't even afford to contact me, lacking money for both transportation to persuade me in person and to pay their phone bills. Despite knowing their dire situation, I felt no sympathy for them. I later learned from a friend that both had engaged in affairs with married individuals, resulting in mutual claims for compensation and drowning them in debt. I couldn't care less about how they would manage their lives from now on, but I hoped, for the sake of their innocent child, they would somehow find a way to live together properly. Amidst this chaos, I remained focused on my work and was promoted to an overseas department manager, becoming the first female to hold such a position in my company. Planning to live abroad for a few years, I decided to rent out my family home. The tenants were a newly married young couple. My father, who always supported me, would have been happy if such honest people lived in the house, rather than lending it to my sister and her husband. I thought this to myself as I looked at a picture of my father and mother in a faraway foreign country.